What's going on, everyone? Ryan Miles here from On Tilt Gaming, here with another deck spotlight. Back when there was a lot of discussion about Prisia and people were talking about banning Leviathan, which eventually ended up happening, but before the announcement had finally come through, one of my major arguments for why Leviathan should not be banned is because I thought that Kaguya 4 would almost immediately become the best deck if that were to happen. And as we're shifting sort of towards a more control-ish meta, where Kaguya really thrives, I think that in the coming weeks we might see that come to fruition. But for right now, I just want to talk about Brandan Bremont's first place list from Washington ARG State Championships. So like I said, he did win, and he did play against a couple Fox decks, a couple control decks, and I don't think he lost any matches in the entire event. But obviously there's a lot of different ways that you could probably build a Kaguya list, so we're going to look at what Brandan did specifically and why I think that this list is probably one of the most powerful ones out there right now. So we do have our treasury items, 12 full kimonos, and then 4 medicine, Night Moon Blossom, and 2 pictorial scroll. And then the other half of the deck, I think it's like 21 treasuries, 19 spells. The 19 spells are pretty much all like counterspell type cards, right? They're not strictly all counter spells, but Seal of Wind and Light is, Millennium Bond is, Severing Wind is, and then Dawn of the Earth is a pseudo counter spell where it stops like Fox effects and things like that. Prison stops Resonators with Enter abilities. And then you have the one Heavenly Gust, which is just like, oh, make sure that I don't get Neo buried out of the game or something like that, right? So this is the deck. It's just play treasure items and then counter everything else, anything threatening that your opponent tries to do, and then use your win condition of playing Night Moon Blossom, which has barrier innately, and then you just hit them with Night Moon Blossom while it has, like at least 7 kimonos on it, and then you just win the game. So let's go ahead and break down into it, guys. The stone lineup real quick is going to be 4 white stones. We only do have 7 white cards total. It is 4 Seal of Wind and Light and 3 Dawn of the Earth. White is a pretty huge addition to Kaguya because of Seal of Wind and Light, and obviously, of course, Dawn of the Earth, which really helps its Fox matchup, which can give Kaguya problems if unchecked. So the addition of Dawn of the Earth along with Prison makes Fox really difficult to get a footing before Kaguya just kind of runs away with the game doing Kaguya things. And then the 4 seal also helps you win counterspell wars and just pretty much stop whatever it is that you need to stop. You can stop Resonators, which Millennium Bond can't do. You can stop additions, which Millennium Bond can't do. Things of that nature. So the first card we're going to talk about here is just Kaguya's flip side. There's a lot going on the flip side, so I kind of want to just go through it and make sure you understand everything that this card does and why it's so incredibly powerful. So we know that in general, free abilities and Force of Will are insanely overpowered. We've just banned 2 cards that have 4 abilities on them that don't cost any mana whatsoever. And Kaguya kind of falls in the same line. It's a little bit different because you need to have cards in the field and you need mana to play those cards. But once they're on the field, they untap every turn. You're just continually generating more and more resources the longer the game goes on with this card flipped. So by playing, because you're drawing these kimonos and these miracle medicines for free, you really just need to spend the mana to play them, which you're kind of just doing in between counterspell turns, and then you're just able to do so many things. You can make Resonators or J-Rulers and Resonators lose attack power, which is important to not dying, because you are kind of a control deck. You're like a combo deck, but you can compete in the long game with control decks because you have so many answers to anything they want to do. So you can make Resonators smaller. You can produce mana for 2 treasure items, which is absolutely insane. Just lets you kind of play all of your cards, which you're going to be drawing a lot of cards with her flip side, with Scroll, and with resting 3 treasure items. You just get a lot of cards in hand. And then some control decks have this problem where they draw 4 cards off of double space time. They have 7 cards in hand, but they're still only on 5 stones, so they can't play multiple cards. They're very gated by their mana base. But Kaguya, by turn 5, you've already played 3 or 4 treasure items. Now you're on 7 mana, which is a huge upswing. You're able to play a 3 mana card like Scroll, and then also leave open 2 counter spells. It's just, you get to do a lot of things when you just get an extra 2 to 3 to even 4 mana per turn. I think that there's no one that would disagree with me that the free mana is just insane. And then, of course, you have 3 treasure items, draw a card, and then 4 treasure items is return a Resonator to its owner's hand. And this one, I think, is actually one of the most important abilities on this card. Obviously, the drawing a card and producing mana definitely like super good just for like getting control of the game and like running away with it, basically. But it would actually be pretty difficult for Kaguya to win the game if she didn't have a way to either give her win condition flying or to get rid of a blocker, right? So the fact that you can put 7 kimonos on a Night Moon Blossom and then attack with it, and then any resonator your opponent has, as long as it doesn't have barrier, you can return it to their hand with Kaguya's ability. And that's just like, that just guarantees that your one attack is going to deal 52 to them and you're going to win the game. And the fact that it's not like you're not playing removal, you just have that ability innately in your ruler is incredibly powerful. And then, of course, the last ability is that you can turn her into a 15/15 flyer. That makes her a little bit more vulnerable because while she does have barrier, she can die to battle damage or just having her defense reduced to 0. So that does, like, if you flip her and then, for example, she goes to attack and then they flash in, like, something with more than 50. I'm not. I don't have like an exact example in mind. If they like make a Griffin, right, and then they buff their Griffin with Rapid Growth and they block, boom, you Kaguya's dead forever. There you go. So that's not really relevant, but usually you're gonna win the game with like a Night Moon Blossom and kimonos on it. And sometimes you might like need a little bit of extra damage, so that ability is relevant, but it's probably the one you use the least out of all of these. So next up, we do have the actual kimono in the deck. Ooh, I'm sorry about that. So it's incredibly important this card is 1 mana, and you do actually play as many, this deck does play as many 1 mana treasuries as possible. It's a full 12 kimono and a full 4 Miracle Millennium Medicine. This entire deck is a tongue twister, I don't know what's going on. So 1 mana cards in a deck full of counterspells have this really cool synergy, right? Because the nature of the counterspell holding deck is to just draw a card and then pass the turn. Opponent tries to do anything, counter it. Okay, my turn. Call a stone, pass the turn. Oh, you want to do anything? Counter it. And it's really interesting that every single counterspell this deck plays is 2 mana, right? And pretty much in all of Forcible except for like Wall of Wind and some Wanderer cards. So on turn 1, you can't really counterspell anything unless you're energizing. So like you want to have a turn 1 play. So okay, cool. Play a treasury item. All right, cool. I can draw extra cards on my ruler side and I can play them on turn 1. And then turn 2 goes, you call stone pass and you stare into your opponent's eyes. They try and do something and you say, no. All right, turn 3, what do? Well, you've got 3 mana. You only need 2 mana on your opponent's turn to counter anything they want to do because you have so many cards that just deal with like any opportunity, anything that your opponent tries to do. So you just play a 1 mana treasury and then leave open 2 mana. Turn 4 comes around, you can play 2 treasuries, or you can just hold open double counterspell depending on the matchup, depending on what you really need to be worried about. And then you're just basically using your odd mana and your extra mana to just play the cheapest things possible to get the most value out of your cards, basically. You don't want to pay 3 mana for like, I don't know, some bad treasury like the tree, right? Because, okay, you draw a card, but you just invested 3 mana at sorcery speed into like not really doing anything. So you want the worst cards in your deck, which are the treasury items for the first couple turns before you're able to flip your ruler. You want them to be as cheap as possible so that you're really getting the most value out of them just being on the field. And of course, kimono is also like the win condition on the deck, right? So bestowed resonator gets +1/+1 for each water kimono you control, and that is each kimono has that text on it. So if you have 1 kimono on a resonator, it gets +1/+1. If you have 2 kimono on a resonator, it gets +2/+2 for each kimono. So it's times 2 +2/+2, and then so it's a total of +4/+4, right? And then 3 kimono would be +9/+9, 4 kimonos +16/+16, etc., etc. And the big number that you hit usually is if you have 6 kimono, it's +36/+36, which is just shy of OTKing with Night Moon Blossom. Night Moon Blossom is a 3/7, I think. Let's just go over to that real quick. Yeah, Night Moon Blossom is a 3/7, so that would be 3,900 damage. You'd be 1 off. So 7 kimono is the break point where you're hitting for 52. Even if they use the last drop to gain 1,000 life, they're gonna die if you put 7 kimonos on a Night Moon Blossom. So that's why Night Moon Blossom is our win condition. Just the fact that it's a cheap resonator with barrier. I think it's the least expensive resonator that just innately has barrier. The other one being Will-o'-the-Wisp. And Will-o'-Wisp is a little bit more vulnerable because it has an enter ability. So you can prison it, which, prison doesn't target, so it gets around barrier. And on the other note, Night Moon Blossom is a treasury item. So you can use Night Moon Blossom for your Kaguya abilities. You can, tap it to produce mana, draw a card. You don't want to tap it on your turn or on your opponent's turn because you don't want it to be vulnerable to getting attacked and things like that. While it does have barrier and is untargetable, they can just attack it with like an 8/8 and it'll die if it doesn't have any kimonos on it. So you just kind of like on your turn before untap, draw a card. Okay, now untap. Look, it's never able to get attacked and you're able to use it for a resource. So the fact that it's a treasure item is really cool, and just having barrier means that when you put kimonos on it, it's going to be very, very difficult for your opponent to not lose the game. So that's the most important treasure items. That's kind of how the win condition worked, and then the rest of the deck is what we're going to check out now. Now, Millennium Bond is something that we have seen in a couple Lumia decks here and there, and there was, I believe, 4 in the deck that Alex Planin played in Toronto. He played green, blue, black Lumia with 4, I'm pretty sure it was 4 Millennium Bond, like 4 Prison, 4 Abdul, just pure hate, right? Millennium Bond has like definitely proven itself to be a very good card. In general, counter spells feel very strong right now because it's really weird. Like, they're good because of Severing Winds, even though they're like not super good against Severing Winds. Like, you play a card, then you play a card, and then your opponent tries to Severing Winds, and then you can seal it. Well, now if your opponent tries to like Severing Winds your seal, you can like Severing Winds it back. It's a really weird thing, but like Severing Winds helps you win counter wars if you play a lot of counter spells and your opponent also plays counter spells. But Millennium Bond no exception to this. But what makes Millennium Bond like particularly good in Kaguya is the fact that you actually get both modes of the ability, right? So you get this, counter a target chant, draw a card, which is just a strong ability for 2 mana. It's strictly better than Keen Sense, I would say, except for the fact that you can't counter additions, but like, additions aren't super popular right now. But if you have a flipped J-Ruler, Kaguya, she counts for half of the green-blue resonator thing, so then you just need to control a green or a blue resonator. Night Moon Blossom is both, for example. And then you also get to put a treasury item with total cost 3 or less into your field. And one of the most important treasury items that cost 3 or less is Kaguya's Pictorial Scroll. Enters the battlefield, lets you remove the top 3 cards of your deck face down, which is essentially drawing 3 cards because you can cast them. So Millennium Bond, for 2 mana, just to like put this all together, lets you counter target chant, draw a card, and then put on a treasury item, which helps you with your like Kaguya abilities, and that treasury item lets you draw 3 cards. So you're like drawing 4 cards, increasing your treasury count, and countering a chant for 2 mana. That is insanely valuable, and like regardless of what else the Kaguya deck is doing, it would be worth considering playing her strictly because of how like relevant Millennium Bond is in the current meta. The fact that it just gets tremendously insane upside from being in a Kaguya deck makes it like a very obvious choice as a 4/of for pretty much anything else. But Millennium Bond is like, counter spells again have like recurring synergy where the more you play, like the more you can just kind of throw some away, and then like the more you're able to just always win counter wars. So Seal of Wind and Light kind of also complements Millennium Bond in that sense. And whatever Millennium Bond can't counter, Seal of Wind and Light can. And Millennium Bond kind of comes up more when like you try and seal something, and then they try and Severing Wind your seal. You can Millennium Bond the Severing Wind, and because you're Kaguya, you like always have more mana than your opponent because you can tap treasury items for mana. So even though like, if your opponent is not playing mana dorks, they're just calling stones at the same rate as you, when you finally flip, you're just 3 mana ahead of them because of your treasury items. So like, that's kind of why this deck feels so comfortable playing in the counterspell war all the time. And Seal of Wind and Light, like I said, just 2 mana counter anything. Just whatever you really don't want to deal with, you can always Seal of Wind and Light it. Except for like Fox abilities, but we have answers for that too. So next up is Severing Winds, and again, just kind of going all in on counter spells. This is really good because like, if like, you're always going to be leaving open at least 2 mana, right? So your opponent goes to play a powerful card, you seal it, you Millennium Bond it, you Dawn of the Earth, you Prison it, whatever it is that you do, and they're like, you got me, ho ho, but now you're tapped out, aha, I can get you, and they try and like play their second powerful card, and you're like, Severing Winds. Like, you always have the ability to stop your opponent from doing anything as long as you're leaving open at least 2 mana. And that's just like, Severing Winds just kind of like pushes onto it a lot more. And the fact that Kaguya as a deck is just drawing a lot of cards between Kaguya's ruler side, drawing the treasuries and filtering through the deck quicker, and then when you finally do flip, you're just usually drawing like an extra card per turn by tapping 3 treasure items, if not 2 cards per turn. So Severing Winds just like says, okay, my opponent is only playing 1 card per turn, because if they ever play more than 1 card per turn, I'm Severing Windsing it, and then they can only play 1 card a turn, but it's probably getting sealed or Millennium Bonded or prisoned or, any of that kind of stuff, or returned to their hand with the Kaguya ability. It makes it very, very difficult for your opponent to play the game, and then you can kind of just chill until you find your win condition and then blow them out. It's very difficult to kind of beat this lock. One of the best ways to do it, I think, would be to play discard, but this really hasn't popped up yet. But we'll see. All right, I'm calling it. Discard is going to be perhaps the correct way to deal with this deck. But again, Millennium Bond, Seal of Wind and Light, and Severing Winds all kind of complement each other because Counterspell Wars are a little bit popular in this format, I would think, because of how strong Lumia is. And in general, Severing Winds is just a very, very strong card. Next up, we have Dawn of the Earth. So this is like the safety net, I guess, like the catch-all. Anything that Seal of Wind and Light can't counter, Dawn of Earth is going to deal with it. And that's really just like the Fox Chimera ability, and I can't think of anything else that like Seal can't stop, right? But Dawn of the Earth will handle that, and then will also let you OTK quicker with your Night Moon Blossom. Instead of needing 7 kimonos, you suddenly only need 4 kimonos. For example, we talked about 4 kimonos would be +16/+16. Night Moon Blossom is a 3/7, so it goes up to 1900 attack. You declare an attack for 19. You use Dawn of the Earth to recover it and give it +2/+2, so they take 21, and then you attack again for 21. That's 42. They lose the game. So a lot of different applications here. Just very strong in the meta because you do see Lumia decks playing things like Kaguya's Moonbeam Butterfly. You do see Fox decks just being a very popular deck overall, so Dawn of the Earth helps with them. And then the added bonus of just, being able to have a quicker win condition where you need it is I think, really, really strong. So Dawn of the Earth, definitely worth the inclusion of White, and again, Fox can be one of your worst matchups, but with the inclusion of Dawn and Prison, it really makes it so that there's not much in the format that is beating you. And last but not least, we do have Prison and the Lunar Lake. And again, this is just like your opponent goes to do anything and they just can't. They never have the opportunity to be able to play their win condition, their cards, like whatever it is they want to do. They really have a tough time fighting through all those counter spells, and then also Prison. Like as soon as, and one of the good things about Prison, right, is this is a 3-mana card, but you can play it as a 2-mana card by setting it face down. The ability to just take turn 2 off and just be like, okay, turn 1, treasure item. Turn 2, set Prison. Like what do you need to seal on turn 2, right? What do you need to seal? What do you need a Millennium Bond? Like based on the fact that you only have like a 5, 6, maybe 7 card hand on turn 2, there's nothing, like you don't really know what counter spells you're going to have over the next few turns. Like your hand is going to be like 2 counter spells, 4 treasury items, 3 counter spells, 3 treasury items, that kind of thing. Like maybe it's 2 Millennium Bond and 1 seal. Like you only have 1 seal right now. You don't want to like just seal a Resonator, so you don't, like if you leave mana open to seal, then you're committing to seal whatever they play. Otherwise, you're just not using the mana. So Prison lets you set the card, and then you're investing that 2 mana into later turns. So when you do want to start being a bit more proactive with your mana and playing like multiple treasure items per turn, casting Scroll, drawing 3 cards, maybe playing more treasure items so that you're getting your Kaguya flip side ability, like getting those abilities active. You just want to like take a turn and play some treasure items. You've already invested the mana into playing Prison from turn 2, and now you can flip it whenever you want to. And that's just something that you really want to be doing, again, in Counterspell Wars. Another thing is like before you flip your Kaguya, when you're playing an even mana game against your opponent, you want to have an extra 0 mana card essentially to be able to get the leg up and start the counter war, and then have the mana and the cards to finish it first and make sure that all of your cards are the one resolving and not your opponent's. And in general, Prison's just super good in the metagame as a whole. We think about the best decks in the format, we think about Fox, and we think about Lumia, just completely based on enter abilities. And one of our worst matchups, I say, it would be Prisia. Prisia, the most threatening Resonators in that deck are like Mariabella, Jack and the Beanstalk, Izanagi. Some lists still play Izanagi. Like, if they're going a grindier build, they might play Frigg. Every threat that Prisia really plays is going to get stopped by Prison. So that's just, a good card in our potentially worst matchup. So it's like definitely something we want to be playing. It's in our colors, just overall a very strong card. And another thing about Prison is that Kaguya has this innate ability to handle Resonators, right? Anything that's like super tiny, we can just make its attack 0 for like 3 treasure items. Anything that's super big, we can just return it to our opponent's hand. But we don't really want to return cards to our opponent's hand if they have strong enter abilities. If they get more value by replaying the card again, Well, Prison kind of stops anything that has an entry ability from being super threatening. We can look at a Captain Hook, be like, we didn't have the counterspell this time. It's on the field now. How do we deal with it? Well, you know, you can't counter it if it's already on the field, but Prison's another way we can bounce it to their hand. They invest 5 mana trying to recast it, and we just have the Prison or maybe the Seal by then. But, like, you know, Prison's an extra seal. It's an extra answer to Resonators, where, like, Millennium Bond really isn't. So that is the deck. That is what this Kaguya list is trying to do. And I think overall the counterspell package is just in a really good place right now. Again, if you are trying to beat something like this, I think the best ways to go about it, I say discard. I think the discard would be really good, but I haven't actually tested it. I think the fact that Kaguya draws a lot of cards might make it a problem. But in general, I think discard is good against counterspell decks, like, as a general statement. I'm not sure that Kaguya would be like the best matchup for it because of how many cards it draws, but it's a potential thing to think about. But other than that, ruler decks, you know, Prisia is an example, but if you are playing Lumia, you don't want to try and get into counterspell wars with Kaguya because you will lose every time. You don't want to play your fat Resonators because they will get, like, you know, Prison, sealed, return to your hand, whatever. So the best thing you can really do is just flip your 10/10 and start hitting them in the face, and they have to, like, tap treasury items to make its attack lower, but then those treasury items are no longer available to bounce your Resonators. You just have to find that optimal time to flip and just, you know, get this uncounterable, unbounceable J-Ruler on the board, and that's, like, the only way that you can really aggro this deck out. So that's Kaguya 4. Again, I do think this is probably the strongest deck in the meta right now. And Brandan's twist is definitely, I think, one of the most optimal. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in a couple days with another deck spotlight. Thanks for watching, everyone.